All right, welcome to Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Salazar from Visalia, California, and I'm really excited. I've actually known Chief Salazar for a number of years, and I know that he's doing really good things in the wellness space. Welcome to the show, Chief Salazar.
Thanks
Thank you
for
so much
having
for
me. I'm
being
excited to be
here.
here.
Yeah, I mean, we've connected now for maybe the last 2 years at various conferences, and I know that wellness is a priority to you and your agency. And so I'm excited to share some of your insights and your knowledge. But before we do that, I want to kind of understand, why did you get into law enforcement? Why this career path?
Yeah, so again, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I'm excited to be here and to talk with you. So law enforcement, I'm actually in my 32nd year with Visalia Police Department. And I say a lot of times I think law enforcement chose me versus me choosing it. I grew up in a law enforcement family. So my dad was a police officer and then a deputy sheriff. So it's all I've known really for my entire life. I think my dad became a police officer for the Porterville Police Department when I was like 2 years old, and he worked there for a few years, and then eventually went to the sheriff's department. So I just grew up in law enforcement. It was a part of my childhood, and I grew up around seeing my dad in uniform and hearing the stories that him and his friends would tell, going to different events with him and his friends, and seeing law enforcement. And I was always kind of drawn to it. But interestingly enough, it wasn't really my first choice for a career. I grew up in the Top Gun era, so when I was in high school, I wanted to be a pilot in the Navy. That was the thing. So that's kind of what I pursued. But then for some medical reasons, I wasn't able to do that, and it was kind of just like a natural shift from that to law enforcement. And so at 19 years old is when I applied to be a community service officer here for Visalia PD, and got hired and got the job, and have been here ever since.
It's pretty amazing that you've been with the same agency for your entire career. How have you seen things evolve over time in the context of wellness since you started at 19 and now 32 years in?
Yeah, so 32 years, you look back, so I started in 1993, and how it's evolved, I mean, is night and day. I mean, but I still think, obviously we have a long way to go. And that's one of the things about wellness. I think we're always learning and growing and finding out, things that work or don't work. And so it's definitely been a journey. But in 1993, the stuff we're talking about wellness now, whether it's physical fitness or mental wellness or emotional, spiritual, whatever it may be, we didn't talk about those things at all in
Mhm.
1993. And like I said, even growing up in a law enforcement family, that's just not stuff you talked about. Physical fitness. I mean, I remember my dad going and working out with his friends and tagging along sometimes. And even when I started, there was an emphasis on physical fitness. Visalia PD, when I started, I would say was kind of a pioneer in some of the physical fitness piece. We used to have a program that was called disability avoidance, and so officers would take a physical fitness test every quarter. And then depending on what you scored, you would get like a 1, 2, or a 3% bonus in December. And then they paid for your gym membership. And so at the time, like in the 90s and early 2000s, that was unheard of. Nobody else around here was doing that. Unfortunately, we lost that because of budget cuts at some point, and we still haven't got that back. But so you've seen it change a lot, some for the better, some for the worse. Like we lost that physical fitness program. But in terms of mental wellness or emotional wellness or really how to deal with a job, that wasn't anything we talked about in the 90s and even early 2000s. So it's come a long way.
Yeah, for sure. And I think even just in the last 10 years, it's really come a long way. And obviously California is kind of leading that charge and has been implementing some of these things a lot longer than other states in the country. But I wanted to kind of circle back to one of the things that you said that I really loved, and I smiled really big. So if anyone's watching the video, I smiled when you said this, but you said law enforcement chose you, that you didn't choose it, it chose you. And that's something that I feel like I say a lot, and obviously I'm not in law enforcement, but I get that same question, like, why do you work with law enforcement? Like, why? And I'm like, for me, like, I didn't set out to work in law enforcement. I honestly think there's a lot of groups that are easier to teach some of this wellness stuff to than
I'd
a group of
agree.
cops. But I do feel like you end up where you're supposed to be and where you're
Yeah.
meant to be. And I very much like related to you and you said like, man, I just feel like it found me, like this is what I was supposed to do. And I feel the same way in that context too. But you come from a family of law enforcement. You've now been in this career for 32 years. And we talked offline a little bit about your why and how important that is to keep your focus like on the focus on what your why is. How important do you think that is to have a why, and how do you think that having a why impacts your wellness throughout the years?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we all know and we've heard studies and everyone can talk about when we come out of the academy or when we decide we're going to go into a law enforcement career, you go into the academy, you're excited to go. I mean, everyone says you want to help people, and I think that's true. We all get into this because we want to do something bigger than ourselves. We want to help people. We want to make our communities better. We want to catch bad guys and put them in jail, right?
Mhm.
That stuff's exciting too. So I think when we come into this career, you come in excited and ready to tackle the world and do good things and help people. The reality is, as you start doing stuff, you deal with so much negativity. And then you just kind of develop this cynicism and you start seeing things very different. So that why tends to become over time tarnished. And I think that's unfortunate because, I think what we do has a really big purpose. And it's important, particularly in your wellness journey, I think to be successful in a law enforcement career, whether it's to be successful in assignments or to be successful to promote, but certainly in order to keep the right mindset to be well, you have to have that focus on purpose. It comes down to the idea that if to be able to pour into others, whether that's the people that you serve in our community or the people that are within your organization, to be able to pour into others, your cup has to be full. You can't pour from an empty cup. And
Yeah.
I think keeping that focus on what your why is and what your purpose is keeps your compass pointed true north. It kind of keeps that perspective, like, why did I get into this? I'm here to help people. To help people, I need to be physically fit. To help people, I need to be emotionally well so that I can help others and deal with their issues, but then take care of myself and my family. To have that purpose gives you that mental stability, I think, too, to put things in perspective. Understanding that you deal with a lot of negativity, but there is a lot of positive in the world around us too. And particularly after coming out of like 2020, and we've seen this throughout a number of different times over the last 30 years, where law enforcement it kind of becomes the punching bag for a number of different societal issues. But the reality of it is, and I've always found this to be true, those may be the loudest voices, but they're not the majority of the voices. And so that purpose kind of helps you to look past, some of that fog, if you will. And the truth is back there that people need their police. People need law enforcement. They want law enforcement. They support us. They just want us to do it well. And I don't think that's asking too much.
Yeah, and I agree with you that sometimes it's easier to take that negative mindset and to kind of like spiral down in that way. And that why can be, like you said, that like North Star of like pulling you out, being like, no, I'm doing this for a reason. This is why it's important, and allowing yourself to kind of break that mental cycle of negativity and keep pushing forward in a really positive way. And I'm sure everyone is guilty of this. Like there's times where like I feel like that too. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. I'm so stressed. This happened, this happened. Like, why am I even doing this anymore? Like and then you have to like take a moment, like take a breath, take a pause and say, no, this is why. There's a deeper reason, and all of this stuff that I'm going through is worth it because of this deeper purpose why. And so I agree with you. I think trying to refer back to that why as often as you can to try to drown out some of that negativity and push forward in a positive and productive way.
Yeah, no, I think it's maybe one of the pieces of a wellness journey that we overlook. You know, and as you look at implementing different parts of a wellness program, or whether it's fitness or peer support, mental health, I think a big component of that for leaders is to continually provide that perspective.
Mm.
What our purpose is, to give that context. You know, as a chief, you have a different, you kind of see things a little bit differently because your officers are out dealing with the work, right? And they're the ones that a lot of times are dealing, seeing the things that are terrible. They're dealing with the stuff that's terrible. You know, people aren't calling 911 and asking a cop to come over to tell them, "Hey, you're doing a great job." On the flip side of that, though, the cool thing about being in a leadership position sometimes is I get to go to a lot of community meetings. Yeah, I deal with complaints, and yeah, you got to deal with issues and people that make mistakes. But I know from my perspective, I get to go out to a lot of those meetings or have community contacts where I hear people say how much they appreciate the work that our officers are doing. They appreciate the safety that they provide. They appreciate what they're doing. I hear far more compliments about law enforcement than I do complaints. And I think that's important that our people get to hear that too. It's important for us to share that with them and kind of keep them, like I said, pointed in that true north, that what you are doing makes a difference. And that helps them kind of keep that purpose, I think, keep that why, and hopefully helps to motivate or kind of create that desire to be well. Because you have that purpose and you want to keep doing what you're doing. There's a reason to what you're doing. There's a reason to be well, to perform at your best.
100%. And I think that why looks different for everyone. And so one of the things that, I try to tell people, especially if I get up in front of like a briefing or something, and I'm like, you don't know me. Like I am a complete stranger to you at this point. Obviously, it's different for you. Like I'm an outsider coming in, but like encouraging everyone to connect with what's important to them as an individual rather than like maybe expectations from others, because I think that it does have to mean something to the individual. And so having everyone think about that on a personal level, like why is this important for me specifically? And then using that as the motivation. On that topic, what is your why? Why is it important for you to stay physically and mentally well? And has that why changed over the last 32 years, or has that stayed the same?
It's a good question. Well, I'll address the last part. I think it's changed over time, just because you kind of develop a different perspective or context depending on where you're working. And so I would say early on, my why was, I was inspired a great deal by my dad and his journey, and got to see the things that he did. And so my why was I wanted to be like him. I wanted to do the things that him and his friends did, and I wanted to succeed in the same ways. And then you start working, and then you start finding. I think you said everybody kind of has a different why. Um, for me, I love doing patrol, and then it was like my why became, well, I want to do the SWAT stuff because that looks like a lot of fun too. And so my why became for wellness was to be fit enough and strong enough to be able to make it onto the SWAT team. And at some point, it's like, hey, I want to promote, and so your perspective or your context starts getting a little bit bigger, and I think then your why becomes, I really like what I do, but I think that I can contribute and make this place better. I think I can do something that helps not just make my organization better, but hopefully through that, make a difference in the community. So I think the root why for me has always been, I believe in what we do. I believe that we make our community safer. I believe, I love driving around and seeing that people feel like they can walk downtown or they can go to a park and they can enjoy it. And I think, we provide that opportunity. That's your bigger why. But then I think in different assignments throughout time, it's changed too. I think one of the most difficult assignments I've worked, but by far the most rewarding, and it might sound weird, but when I worked in detectives, I worked child abuse and sex crimes. And it was by far the most difficult assignment in terms of dealing, with, very complex, very difficult issues. But you really felt like you were helping people too.
Mhm.
And for me, that became the big why while you were in there. Like, this is a job where I can really make a difference. I want to be as good as I can at it. So, I think it changes too. Some people really like traffic stuff. And I think that's important. I love that they have their why to keep our roads safe because that helps save lives. Some people, like working homicides or working gangs. And so I think that why shifts over time in terms of what your kind of focus is at the time. But hopefully, the underlying root is always that we are here to help people and to make this place better.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I'm interested to know because I know we talked about, when you started, wellness wasn't really a focus. Maybe some of the physical fitness stuff was. What are things that you have done throughout your career that have helped you to achieve that why, to being physically and mentally fit? Is there anything that you've done personally that has helped you?
Yeah, and I think some of it is stuff I learned from my family too, from my mom and dad, who I think provided some really good examples. So like growing up, seeing my dad do the work that he did, I don't know that I realized it when I was a kid, but maybe as I got older, I realized that there were certainly times where maybe he struggled with the wellness stuff because of things that he was involved in or had seen, and so, but they always laid a really good foundation. I think family was important. They were very rooted in faith, and so that has always been a background in my life. We were raised in the church and having that faith background, which I think has always been something that kind of keeps you rooted and grounded, which I think is good. Um, Early in my dad's career, most of the people he hung around with were cops, and then I think he struggled for a little while with some things, and then he really kind of laid a good example of. He really built a circle of friends around him that were not related to law enforcement, and I think that is very important. And I saw myself kind of take the same path. I think early in my career, everything was involved around law enforcement. Everybody I hung out with, they were all cops. Um, and that's good. I mean, we're part of a team, and it's good to have those relationships. But I think it's very healthy to have a circle of people around you that are not involved in law enforcement. It just gives you a different view of the world, I think. It gives you somewhere that you can have friends and not feel like you have to talk about cop stuff all the time. And it helps to give you, I think, a good sense of what the rest of the world looks like, how they view things or how they see things. So I think that's always been a big part for me. Family, obviously, whether it was my childhood family or my family now, my wife and my two daughters. So I know though how it changed over time. So early in my career, so in January '98, we lost an officer that was on our SWAT team that was killed in the line of duty. And because wellness wasn't really a big topic then, I don't know that we were fully aware of it. But afterwards, and certainly looking back on it now, there weren't any resources really. I mean, immediately after they had you meet with somebody and said, "Hey, you can kind of expect this," and then it was kind of like, "Good luck."
Mm.
And you saw people deal with it in different ways. Some people didn't deal with it in healthy ways. Others, I think, did. Um, but those resources just weren't available, and it wasn't something you talked about. He was killed in a SWAT raid, so there were 16 of us that were all there. But it was probably it was years later before any of us really kind of talked about what happened. Now you have critical incident debriefs that I think are very helpful. You have peer support. You're encouraged to go talk to somebody. Back then, it was certainly a stigma that if you talk to somebody, you can't handle it and
Right.
can be here. So things have certainly changed. And I think along the way for that journey for me, found again the importance of friends outside of law enforcement. I think faith and family, and then realizing that it's okay to go talk to somebody, where it's okay to talk about what you experienced. In fact, it's healthy, and we
Mhm.
grow from that. So think I answered your question, but I mean, that's how it's kind of evolved for me over time.
No, you definitely did, and I appreciate that. And there's a few things I wanted to touch on, like one, the importance of conversation. And I think that we've started to understand that, and it sounds so simple saying just talk about it. But I think it's easier said than done a lot of times. I think a lot of times, you learn to kind of shove it down and posture up and move on. And I think that's one of the things I've seen evolve over the last 8 years is just having more conversations, more outlets for talking about it, peer support teams, post-critical incident, therapists, things of that nature, where you have a safe space to do so. But I also love that you talked about wellness in the context of being rooted and grounded outside of the career. And that's something I've heard recently from a lot of leadership that say that. It's like, try to find that sense of, and I say this in quotes, like normalcy outside of the job where you feel more like you rather than, cop you or whatever title you have. And so I love that you said that. Have a community outside of it, friends, family that keep you rooted and grounded, faith, and then have conversations about it with people who you feel safe having those conversations with.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just lost my train of thought. I just think it's easy to become kind of like this job becomes your identity.
Mhm.
But it's not who we are. It's part of who we are. It's what we do. But I think, particularly if you're going to be, when you talk in the whole scope of wellness, um, wellness obviously applies to how we're able to perform our job, but you're a human being too. And you have a family or you have friends, we're here for, 10 to 12 hours out of the day, and then we go home to something else. The
Mhm.
majority of our time is spent somewhere else. And so I think having somewhere where you're rooted and grounded is important because that is who you really are. And at some point, we one of the things you'll hear a lot too is when you talk to cops is they're looking towards that retirement date. Um, and I've certainly done that as well, when that retirement date comes, but I really hope that there's a lot more beyond that date for me too. And at some point, this uniform is going to come off and I'm just going to be Jason again. And so it's important, that you continue to build and keep those roots, whether it's family, friends, hobbies, I think are really important. It's another one I learned from my dad, having stuff that you like to do that's not necessarily associated to our work is healthy and hopefully prepare you for years that go well beyond what our retirement date is.
100%. And you have to be beyond your retirement eligibility
I'm
already.
close.
You're
I'm
close.
close.
Okay.
I started young. I mean, yeah, I'm at the age I could,
Yeah.
but I still have a little bit left in
A
me.
little bit, yeah. But I think it's so important to remember that you are humans, not robots. And I think that when you can understand that you are humans and you have human traits and qualities about yourself, then it not only like makes it like it takes that guard down where you're like, okay, like there might be things that bother me or impact me, and I might need resources because I'm human and I have feelings and I have emotions. And yes, like there are times where you have to manage those in a way because you have a job that you're doing. And but at the same time, I think it's just so important to remember that like you are human, you're not a robot, and it's important to make sure you take care of yourself in a human way with that compassion. And I think retirement is always going to be a motivation, of course. Like you do want to get to the end of that career and have longevity. And I don't know I don't think I can walk into a room of any first responder and say, hey, who wants to do this job for 20, 30 years and get to the end of it and not be able to enjoy your retirement? Like, how many of you want to like, you know, meet that statistic within like 5 years or not be able to move or not be mentally well? Like no one wants to sign up for that. No one wants to get into this retirement and not have any life left. Like the goal is to, like you said, have an extended period of time where you get to enjoy other things. And for some people it's another career path. For other people, and I've had a lot of these conversations lately, it's buying a farm and like Idaho and never speaking to people ever again and just being with your horses, whatever that is, I think that is
Yeah.
a motivation. And so I think being proactive, and again, remembering your why, thinking about the future, like trying to make sure that you're keeping yourself well now so that your future self, when you retire, is happy that you did that. I don't
Yeah,
know.
no, I think that's important. That's why I think, wellness is so important. And the more we talk about it, like I said, it's changed so much over the years. And I've seen, you kind of mentioned that there's, statistics that, so many of us only make it 5, 10 years after retirement. I think we need to change that. And some of that is that paradigm shift. Like I'm not here to get the finish line isn't retirement. That should be the beginning.
Hmm.
This is a period where, hopefully we have the resources to stay well and do our part to fulfill that purpose, right? We're here to fulfill a purpose. And this is our period of time to make a difference in our profession, in our communities. But to do that in a way that we take care of ourselves so that we have the longevity afterwards to go enjoy it and kind of
100%.
reap the rewards. I think that's important. And looking past that, like retirement is definitely not the finish line. It shouldn't be. It really should kind of be the beginning. And to get there and to enjoy that, we have to take care of ourselves now.
I honestly couldn't have said that any better. And I loved that sentence, retirement is not the end, it's the beginning. I love that. I want to talk about something that you bring up a lot in conversation. It's community and community support and protecting and serving your community, and community engagement. And we talked offline and you shared a really cool story about something that happened in your community with your local schools. And I was hoping that you could share this because I thought that this was just so cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for any organization, and I know we're blessed here, knowing that your community supports what you do is huge, and I think it's a big part of the wellness thing. It goes to purpose. It goes to knowing that hey, I work in a place that supports me, a community that appreciates what I do. So, but yeah, I shared a story, and I've shared this with my staff. So this is like 2 years ago. Our local school district did like a state of the district address, and I attended it, and they played this video, and I had no idea that this video was going to come on, so I didn't know what to expect. But they played a video. They had gone to a first grade class at one of the schools, and they asked. So in this video, they talked to 24 first graders. So there were 24 first graders. They asked these first graders, what do they want to be when they grow up? And you heard some of the normal stuff. I mean, it's a really cute video. But what I didn't expect what ended up coming out of it. 24 kids. Of course, there was one that wanted to be a fireman. There was one that wanted to work at a cemetery. There was one that wanted to be a dinosaur. A couple of dancers, doctors, a couple of teachers. But six of the 24, as they're going through these kids, finally one says, "I want to be a police officer." And then a couple more later, another says, "I want to be a police officer." And then like four more after that. Of the 24, police officer was the highest number that people wanted to be. And I think the number five was ballerinas, or the second in line was ballerinas. But to me, like it kind of made me emotional when I watched it. For one, I wasn't expecting it. But I think from like we say, what is it from the word the mouths of babes? These are first graders who I think are also very influential or influenced. But when they asked them what they wanted to be, 25% of those kids said they want to be police officers. And to me, that says a lot about, I think, our community, our police officers. Kids still look up to us. Kids
Yeah.
still think cops are important. Kids still think they're heroes. Um, and it was just very moving to me. And I think, so, I've shared that with my staff because, like I said, we can get so wrapped up in thinking people don't like the cops, the community's against us. And I think the truth is that's just not the case, not in most places. There may be some places where it's rougher than others, but I think most places, most people know that they need law enforcement. They know that they need the police. They respect them. They appreciate them. How we write, it's up to us though, how we write the next chapters
Mhm.
of policing and law enforcement. Um, we are the only ones that can really kind of continue to influence what those first graders will think when they get to seventh or eighth grade or high school or as they become adults, right? It's how we carry ourselves, it's how we do the work that we do, it's how we present ourselves, and all of those things, I think, come back to wellness. It's important that, I think you look good, feel good. When a
Mhm.
police officer shows up, I mean, we want to see someone that, commands respect. I think that wears a uniform well. That when that first grader sees them, they're like, I want to be like that guy, or I want to be like that girl. Um, and I know for me as a kid, that was the case. I wanted to do like what my dad did, or like his friends were. So, wellness, I think, really kind of contributes to that overall holistic community health too. I think it's good that a community respects and appreciates their police. It says a lot about the police. It says a lot about the community. I just think it's a big part of wellness, and it's important that we share those kinds of stories with our staff because they don't, like I said, the officers sitting around briefing every day at the table. They don't get to see or hear as much as that because they're going to leave briefing and go to a domestic violence call or a traffic accident, pull
Right.
someone over that's mad at them. But I think that's the truth. 25% of those kids want to be cops.
I loved that story when you originally told me. I think when we talked about that, like I got chills and kind of emotional too, because that is so cute and so inspiring. And you are heroes, and for them to recognize that at such a young age and aspire to be that. And I think it's a testament to you never know when you can impact someone's life. And so, like you said, like being well and presenting yourself well and treating people well, and, that impacts who people want to be and who they look up to. And so I think that that story is so cute. And I also like that you talked about like it's your job to continue that, to make sure that they still have that opinion of you and aspire to be like you later in their life. And I think that kind of rolls into what you guys are doing organizationally with wellness and how you're supporting wellness internally. Are you willing to share maybe some of the top things that you are doing for your organization? And, if there are any like specific pillars or programming that you have found to be a focus or really successful.
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of start that off with, I think we're still on that journey and we're still trying to pave the path of what wellness will do, a complete wellness program would look like here at our department. But it's certainly changed over the years. And I think you mentioned earlier, really in the last 10 years, it's really accelerated. But
Mhm.
I can look back over 30 years at the department and see how much it's changed. I mean, I think some of the biggest things we've done are we have a really strong peer support team that we found has been very beneficial, and that's probably the biggest piece we put in place first, along with a pretty strong chaplain program as well. We do have some chaplains that come out and ride, and they also kind of really work with our peer support team to provide support and advice, or just to be an ear for officers that may need it. As we have, if they go out on a difficult call, they're there and available. Our peer support team, I think now we have about 22 people that are on the peer support team.
Nice.
In order to be on the peer support team, they're nominated by their peers, and then they have to be willing to do that. We thought that was important because you could get people that just say, "I want to be on the peer support team because I want to hear all the stuff."
Right.
You want them to be people that are respected and trusted by their peers and have the right motivation. So really, that's probably the biggest piece, and maybe the one that I think we've seen the most use out of. Um, I remember when we first started the peer support team, I was like, who's really going to use this? I mean, are people going to do it? And they do. And that's a good thing. They've been there to support their peers, provide a lot of guidance and help, and it's a very important part. We have a wellness app as well. That kind of gives you can use a wellness app as a guide for information, whether it's about health and fitness or mental wellness or whatever it may be, substance abuse issues, or questions. So it's there, but I think the most important piece is it just makes things far more accessible, whether it's a peer support member. You don't have to go ask somebody, hey, who's a peer support member and can I get their number? You can go right to the app and it kind of connects you either with a chaplain or peer support, or it'll also connect you to EAP, or to a therapist that is first responder qualified. So I think that's an important piece. So yeah, so chaplains, peer support, the wellness app. We do have EAP. I know that some people have used that. It's not always the most effective tool, I think,
Yeah.
um, for law enforcement or first responders. We do have a number of people that I know that have access, local therapists that specialize in first response. And so, I mean, it's good to know that those resources are being used. We just started something new with regards to nutrition. So we have a local company that does like meal prepping services for people. So what they installed a vending machine at one of our district substations, and I just installed another one at our headquarters this last week. But they meal prep, and in the vending machine are all healthy food options. And so it shows you the number of calories, the macros for the meal, but they're all good, healthy food choices that make it available to our employees. When they installed it, she said, we'd probably have to restock it maybe once a week. And we found that they're restocking it 2 to 3 times a week. So
That's
it's
awesome.
been a hit, and that's a good thing. And the feedback that I've gotten is people are really using it to make healthier choices for food because it's so easy for officers just to go through a fast food and grab something real quick. So this gives a good option, a healthy option for them to have a better choice. It really kind of gives towards your health. But then some of the feedback too is that a lot more of the officers now are kind of doing some of their own meal prep. They've seen what it is. They're doing some of their own meal prep, bringing healthier food with them to work, and so that's been a good one. We're still on a journey to find, like I said, 30 years ago, we were kind of pioneers on the physical fitness side with the gym memberships and the testing. We lost that a number of years ago. We still don't have that back. We don't have our own gym. So that's still something that we're working to find a good solution to provide some options. But leadership is huge in that. And so, like, I have a sergeant that is very into CrossFit. He took over his shift and started trying to really encourage and challenge his people to join him at the CrossFit gym. And his entire shift works out together now.
That's awesome.
They all meet at the same gym. They all go together. But it's just there's an example of particularly a good first line supervisor, the influence they can have on the wellness of their people. Just by that motivation and encouragement to get his people to go to the gym with him. And now it's spread beyond that shift, and others are going too. And so it's good to see that. I have another sergeant who's very much into jiu-jitsu, and he's encouraged people to come out to the place where he works out and get engaged in jiu-jitsu, which is, I mean, obviously good skills for the work we do, but again, another physical wellness piece. So while we don't have a gym that we can say, hey, this is where you could go to work out, I think there's some good leadership and people that have led by example that show their priority towards physical fitness and have encouraged their people to do that. And I think that's a big piece, if not the most important piece, leading by example.
I love that you said leading by example because there's a lot of this talk sometimes where it's like, yeah, well, we don't have that option at our agency, or maybe the agency isn't providing this for us in one way or another. And to say, hey, like you can actually come together and you can still, as a team, encourage wellness and lead by example. And when you take those first initial steps, it just kind of snowballs. You had that
Yeah.
one supervisor that was like, I do this for me. I found benefit. Why don't you guys come? And I'm sure it didn't happen all at once where everyone did it together all at once. It was probably like one person and then maybe five people, and then it kind of snowballs
Yeah.
from there. So I love that you said that because you do have the ability to make a positive change as an individual as well.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I think that's the biggest piece because you can't, everybody, like you said, everybody's going to have a different why. And in that same vein, everybody's going to have a different approach to wellness.
Mhm.
some people like to swim. I'm a terrible swimmer. Some people like to, do cycling or CrossFit or just go to the gym and lift weights. It might be yoga. Everybody's going to have a different path. And so I don't think you can rely on, and certainly agencies aren't going to be able to meet the demands of everybody's desire or what their why is going to be on their wellness journey. Most importantly, I think it's about, keeping them focused on purpose, keep them focused on a why, and just trying to strengthen a culture that says wellness in all aspects, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, whatever, is important. And we encourage you to do that. And those are two examples of two really good leaders who have done a good job of
Yeah,
saying, it doesn't always have to be provided for you. You can go find it and do it yourself too.
for sure. And I'm gonna hype you up a little bit. I'm gonna call you out a little bit because I know that you guys are like full staffed.
Yeah.
And and I don't know, I mean, obviously, most people know that across the country, that's a challenge with all states. But if people don't know, California especially is struggling with recruitment and retention, and it's so competitive. You know, I obviously work in your area, and I've heard how competitive it is, and
Mhm.
everyone's kind of fighting over the same people. And do you think that your focus on wellness and your wellness programming has helped you with recruitment and retention and has helped you to stay fully staffed?
Yeah, I think it's definitely helped. I mean, in all fairness too, I mean, they got a good contract that certainly helped, but we've hired a lot of lateral police officers, so officers that have come from other agencies. And, as I talked to some of them too, I mean, one of the things that has either drawn them here, or I think too, that keeps them here. And the nice thing about laterals is they can provide some good perspective to the other people that are here too, right?
Mhm.
But that's one thing I've heard a lot of, culture being one of them. Um, Try to be supportive. Um, we do have a focus on taking care of people, but the sense that it does feel like a family. And that's the one that I hear a lot. And what they're kind of referring to is they were supportive of people. We
Mhm.
want them to be successful. Um, so, I mean, I think to answer your question, yeah, I think that's certainly played a role in it. Now, have we figured it all out? No. I mean, we're still on that journey, and there's still more paradigms to shift. There's more culture to change. We can certainly do better, and we're going to keep working towards that. But I think people also want to work somewhere where they know you're committed to doing that, and that's the commitment that we're making.
Absolutely. I have one more question for you. The time goes by so fast every time. I always look up at the clock and I'm like, I can't believe it's almost been an hour. But I have one final question for you. And this could be in the context of leadership. This could also be for someone who's earlier in their career. When it comes to wellness, what advice would you share? Maybe something that you wish you maybe would have known earlier, or something that you wish you would have done that would have helped in the wellness space.
Advice. I mean, I think being aware of the resources. I mean, so much more of it's there now. I mean, I guess to your question, what do I wish was there when I was younger? Like having started out early in the career and having been through, the line of duty death. I wish we would have had the resources that we have today, now that were available to us then, because I think it just would have helped people kind of deal with what had happened, whether it's critical incident debrief or just that peer support is okay. And it's okay to go talk to somebody. But really, again, just the holistic kind of approach to physical and mental and I think emotional wellness. We just didn't have that back then. That wasn't accepted. So I wish we had those resources that we did then now. And then over the 30 years, you can think of a number of examples where that people were dealing with issues, and because whether we didn't have resources or they didn't take advantage of the resources, things didn't turn out well. And you always hate to see that happen. And so, I just think, a stronger culture of we please take advantage of the resource. We can't force people to do it. Um, what we can do is make sure that we have the resources available, that we create a culture that encourages people to use those resources. But people ultimately have to make that choice. But it's our job as leaders, I think, and I wish we'd have had more of that coming up over time. So I think this is all a good change, and I don't fault anybody. I don't want to make it sound like you're faulting anybody either that was back then. That's just not the way it was.
Right.
But fortunately now we've grown and we changed and we've seen the importance of that. And I hope we continue to move in that direction.
Thank you for that. And I love that you said take advantage of them because, like, to your point, when you started, there weren't resources to take advantage of. You didn't know what you didn't know. And now that there's been this progression in wellness and agencies are providing these resources for you, and to your point of what you said earlier, you can't provide everything, but you can do your best to provide as many things as you can organizationally. But then I do think it's a great reminder as an individual to use those resources, take advantage of those resources because the agency is showing you that they care in the ways that they can budgetarily or, resource wise. And so I love that reminder that it's there. Now it's your turn to take that step and actually use it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your insights. I really do appreciate it so much. If there's anything we missed, anything else you want to say before we sign off, the floor is yours.
No, again, thanks, Paige. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I just think, as you kind of wrap it all up together, I think wellness is like the Japanese philosophy of Kaizen. I don't know if you've heard of Kaizen, but Kaizen it's a Japanese philosophy that just means continuous improvement. And when I think of that, it's like just always try and find a way that you can improve. You don't have to meet all the goals today, or you don't necessarily need a timeline. But if you just take the first step and then take the next step, I think when you look at a wellness journey or even in a career, particularly in what we do, we should always be finding a way that we can continuously improve. And when Kaizen to me is like, Jocko talks about this, discipline equals freedom.
Mm,
Um, discipline's more important than motivation. And because motivation is going to change every day. Different leaders is going to change motivation. Some days you just don't feel like it, but discipline is what's going to get you to take that next step. Consistency is key. Just do something. Maybe you have a good hour-long workout today, and if you can only do 5 minutes tomorrow, it's better than nothing. As long as you made some attempt. And then the biggest thing I think on a wellness journey is show yourself some grace. You're going to make mistakes. There's going to be days you don't do well. Pick it up, try it again tomorrow, and just keep putting one foot in front of the other.
thank you. Great words of advice. I appreciate you so much. And hopefully we'll stay in touch and maybe have you as a guest in another 32 years. See how
I
things have
don't
changed.
know, 32 years.
You look so scared when I said
32.
that.
No,
Well,
thanks
thank
for
you
what you
so
do,
much.
Paige. We
Yeah,
appreciate you.
of
Thank you.
course.